Welcome back to Cash and Sass, the podcast where we ditch the shame, talk real numbers, and build bold, bankable wealth without sacrificing who we are. I'm your host, Lisa Marie, fractional CFO, money mentor, and the sassy wealth queen behind Transcendent Wealth Co. And if you're ready to scale with strategy, own your own power, and finally feel wealthy in every sense of the word, then you're in the right place. Today's episode is all about breaking the money rules we were handed and rewriting them for financial independence and freedom. My guest, Walli Miller, is a Bronx-born first-generation millionaire, financial coach, and the founder of Financially Thriving. She turned her 9-to-5 paycheck into stock market gains, made work optional, and is now helping women ditch money shame, become debt neutral, and finally thrive financially. If you've ever wondered what it takes to build wealth when you've never seen it modeled, then this conversation is about to give you the playbook. And as I say, let's dive in and we're going to just go straight into it. Y'all know how I work. What does it mean to be a first generation millionaire?
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here. I am the first member in my family, in my immediate and extended family, to reach a seven-figure net worth.
Awesome. Awesome. What changed, I guess, is what I'm wondering. Like, from your generation to you, do you know what I mean? What shifts did you have to make to be able to see your potential?
Yeah, I think the biggest change that changed really from my parents' generation to my generation was really sort of understanding what our biggest money levers were, right? My parents were hardworking. My dad is an immigrant. He came to the United States, to sort of chase the American dream. And he worked really hard. He was someone who, for my entire life, worked 6 days a week and knew how to earn money. He began earning money, and my mom was someone who had a career of herself. She decided to have, or they decided to have 5 children. So she was a stay-at-home mom for a little over a decade and then went back into the workforce. So although my parents did, both were working for a period of my life and they knew how to earn money, was knowing how to use that money afterward. Now, I will say my dad, he was the primary breadwinner of our household, and we were relatively lower income. So one of the things that my family really sort of stressed is the importance of education. And I, decided, okay, well, I'm going to go to school, go to finish high school, go to college. And I thought that was going to sort of pave the way to being financially successful. But I equated financial success to income. It was the amount of money that I was earning. And, as I started to get my first paychecks, I went into my career. I realized that I also now knew how to earn money, but I didn't necessarily know how to keep it. And that was something that I needed to learn how to do, and really didn't even learn how to do that until in my early 30s.
Yeah, and I didn't learn it until late 30s, early 40s. So there's that. And one of the things I tell my listeners and I tell my clients too is, and similar, is you're making the money. Now let's learn how to manage it and multiply it, which is keep it and put it to good use, right? And so I think that that's really important. And I think it's important for us all to be able to see that our background and upbringing can influence us early on. How did that influence you early on with your money beliefs?
Yeah, I mean, as you know, our relationship with money and our habits with money really is not shaped in our 20s, 30s, 40s, or 50s. It's really shaped by the when we are really young, by the people who raise us and the stories we hear around
In
us.
our society. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. My parents never sat down and had a conversation with me about money, but they had conversations and maybe sometimes arguments about money, or there was a sense of what money could do and what it couldn't do. And so that was my money story. And I think early on, one of the biggest lessons that I had was if you pay your bills, you will be okay. So for most of my life, once I got out of college and got my first job, I was like, okay, if I could just pay my bills, I'm going to be fine. And that was my definition of being quote unquote good with money is okay, I think I'm good with money. I'm able to pay my bills. I knew that if I used a credit card, that was a bill. So make sure to pay off that credit card. So my definition of being good with money was very simple. It was just pay your bills. And I sort of retold that story and had that belief as a really strong held belief for many, many years that because I'm paying my bills on time, I'm good with money. And it wasn't until I sort of read like this clickbaity article, and the name of the article was, couple in their 30s retires to travel the world, where that sort of got challenged a little. I read this article and they used the term, and the term was they built enough wealth to be able to sustain their life. And I said, well, I don't know what that is. And to me, the definition of wealth, or the idea that I had of wealth, was, an old man sitting in a velvet robe, like smoking a cigar. Like that was what I thought of wealth. Or I thought of the athlete, who had, like a multi-million dollar contract, or a singer or an actor. That was my definition of wealth. And it was the first time that the definition of wealth was being redefined for me. And I was like, wow, I know how to pay my bills on time. Sometimes I put a little bit of money into savings, but I don't know what this wealth piece is. And that was sort of my first introduction. Like there might be a whole other side. There might be a whole nother side to money that I'm completely unaware of. And that was sort of like the aha moment that I had, which was, okay, you might be missing this wealth building component.
I think a lot of times we think, okay, we're good with money as long as we're making enough to pay the bills. And what I tell my clients and my listeners is that for me, wealth is going to mean different things for different people. And for me, it's you living your lifestyle aligned with your values and your goals. And you're not giving up the things. However, you are strategically deciding things. You're being very intentional. So there's a difference between feeling like you have to give up and being intentional, right? And so one of the questions I have, and I was thinking about this earlier on, because I think that especially for entrepreneurs, it's really important. And I talk about it quite often, is how can entrepreneurs reframe debt as a tool for growth instead of a source of shame? Because so often entrepreneurs do see it as a source of shame.
Oh, I love this question. I think entrepreneurs, I think society in general really has this definition that debt is either good or bad. I don't even like that type of language. I like to say that debt is either productive or unproductive debt, right?
Ooh, I like that.
Cheap and also expensive debt, right? So when we're thinking about debt, it's like, okay, is this productive or unproductive, right? And if we're just going to give some examples of productive debt, maybe as a business owner, you don't have enough money to make an investment in your business. So you get a loan, but the anticipation is that that loan, that purchase, that experience, that resource, that tool that you're purchasing for your business is going to have a return on investment, right? We're not taking off debt to try to hide the fact that we're not bringing in enough money in our businesses. Or when we're thinking about unproductive debt, a simple sort of way to think about it is putting a shopping spree on a credit card to buy the latest and greatest shoes, clothes, handbags, vacation, knowing that we have no plan to pay that, right? We don't know how that money is going to come in. So there's a difference between productive debt and unproductive debt. And then there's cheap debt and expensive debt, right? When we think of mortgages on a home, that tends to be less expensive debt, right? Even though mortgage interest rates are a little bit higher now, but they still are much cheaper than something like credit card debt, which can be 15, 20, 30% in interest rate. So as business owners, if we do need to take down debt for our business, I think first the question is, what are we spending the money for, right? How is this going to come back in our businesses, right? Do we have a set way that we are going to be able to pay this money back? And is the debt that we're taking on going to help us make more money, right?
Yeah.
So many times we sort of spend money to solve a problem we don't even have, right? or we spend money because we think, oh, well, if I had, a 300, $400 million, 400,000, 500,000 $1 million business, then I would spend, right? Great. That's amazing. I love that you have that abundant mindset, but you are not there now. And
Right,
until
right.
you have that way of sort of a path of how are you going to bring that back into the business, I think it's really important to sort of understand, you know, there is a cost to debt. And that debt is also an expense, a line item, right? Even if it is the interest, it's going to be a line item on your P&L sheet. So
Mhm.
how do you anticipate sort of covering that? So even whether we're talking about entrepreneurs and small business owners, or we're talking about consumer debt, really it's, what is this going to help me do? Is this solving an immediate problem? Is this solving a future problem? And how do I anticipate, what is the plan that I have to cover this expense?
I love that. I love that. And that's really important because I tell people all the time, it's like, look, use it intentionally and strategically, and if you can't,
Yep.
don't use it. And that's where we agree. And I love the way you say unproductive and productive, because I say good and bad, and I say that business owners, multimillionaires, y'all, I will say this until I am blue in the face. Multimillionaires leverage debt every single day. So all the bigwigs who keep telling you that debt is bad, they're being hypocritical. Period. I said it. No other way around it, because those big wigs who are multimillionaires are leveraging debt. Again, it's how you use it. Are you being intentional? Are you being strategic? Or are you being unproductive with it and you're just charging to charge and you don't have a plan in place to pay it back? And that's whether it's business or personal, right? You got to make sure that you're being intentional and being strategic. And I think that that is a really important thing, because so often we let things get in our head. We're a bad person because we had to go, charge this. We're a bad person because we had to go get, we're in debt. They're saying I shouldn't be in debt. Okay, one, life happens, and I'll be the first to tell you I understand. And two, again, unproductive and productive and being intentional and strategic. One of the things that I love about you with your money identity shifts is that you went from spender to saver to wealth builder. So I would love for you to tell us, how has your relationship with money evolved? Because I think it's important. I want them to hear it from somebody else besides me about how my relationship with money has evolved, because I went from not having any money, hating money, to now that is what I do. I wear money earrings, y'all. I talk about money, right? And have a good relationship with money. So I think it's important for them to hear it from someone else, just not only besides me. But how has your relationship with money evolved?
Yeah, I always had this idea that I was good with money. And as my income increased, so did my spending, which was not a problem because I was able to cover my bills. So I said, okay, now my bills are covered and I have this pile of money left over. What do I do with it? I just didn't know what to do with it. So I spent. So I wasn't necessarily an overspender where I only had $50 and I was spending $250. If I had an extra $50, I spent it. Sometimes it went for lunches, dining out, ordering in, clothing, shoes, handbags, home decor. So any extra money that I had left over, it was gone. And I was essentially living paycheck to paycheck, right? Every dollar that came in went out the door. Now, somewhere along the line, I realized that, okay, I should be setting money aside for something. I didn't know what I was saving for, but I did know the concept of saving money. So I said, okay, I'm going to pay my bills. I had a set dollar amount that I was going to put into savings, and then I spend everything else, right? So at this point, I'm living year after year thinking that this is good. My income is increasing. Some of my bills were increasing, but I pretty much try to keep my expenses as constant as possible so that I did have more money to spend on those fun things. And I was missing that wealth building component because I didn't know what it was and I didn't know how to do it. And what I realized, and I love that you said that everyone will define wealth differently. One of the things that really intrigued me is, this whole idea, and I talk a lot about retirement. I talk a lot about reaching financial independence or being work optional. And really, to me, what building wealth meant or what it means, it's giving yourself options. When we're thinking about building wealth, it's giving yourself options to do some things now and also do some things later. So many entrepreneurs, and I know this from my practice, you know this from yours. So many entrepreneurs, what they will do is that they will give themselves another job, right? We want to create these businesses to have freedom, and then we
Mhm.
end up having to work extremely hard, working with people we don't want to work with, on projects we don't want to do, providing services or products that we don't love, because now we have created a trap for ourselves. When really, what entrepreneurship, so many of us pursue it, is simply to give us more options. But if we're earning money, and this is whether you're a 9 to 5er and or a entrepreneur, right? If you are earning money and don't have a job for every single one of those dollars of how it's going to impact your life today, while also not forfeiting what you are going to need in the future, you are just going to perpetuate the same cycle. And so when we're thinking about building wealth, it's simply how can I have the money that I am bringing in from whatever resource it is, whether it's the 9 to 5 or the business? How can I use the money that I'm bringing in right now to live a good life now while also saving and planning for the future that is going to happen, right?
Right.
How can I create that path so working does become optional? So that I can continue to do the work that I love for as long as I want to do it. I can take a sabbatical if I want. I can take a break that I want. I could decide which projects, clients that I do or don't want to work on or work with, right? How can I create this space of giving myself some options of working 3 days a week or 5 days a week or 6 months out of the year or 9 months out of the year, right? How can you do that? And the key to being able to do that is making sure that the money that you are bringing in is also being used to produce more income for you in the future.
Yeah, yeah. And I tell people all the time, look, I had someone say that the reason why they saved and never spent is because they thought they had to choose. And I was like, but you don't.
Mhm.
And they're like,
Yeah.
what? It was like, wait, what? And I was like, you don't. Why can't you do
Yeah.
both? And she goes, what do you mean? Why can't I do both? Why can't you do both? Why can't we build a money roadmap for you that is you're living your life, right? A good life, the way you want to, and we're making the money work for you, and we're saving for the things that are going to come up in the future, meaning your yearly expenses, meaning the things that are going to eventually happen, so that it doesn't completely derail you. Why can't we do both? Now, does that mean you may find out that you're spending more money than you really thought you were and you're going to cut back on some things? Yes, I can guarantee it. People do not realize how much they spend Starbucks going out to eat until they really look at their bank accounts. And it's because we have a card. All we got to do is tap, tap, tap. I mean, and now people are paying with their phones. I don't like doing that. And we do it nature. We don't think about it. And that's the key, is being able to think about it. So I love that you're saying, what can you do for now and prepare for the future that we know is going to happen, right? Now, we're not saying something bad's going to happen. What we're saying is the future is going to come, and eventually your vehicle is going to need some work on it. Eventually, some appliance in your house is going to need some type of work on it, right? Those things are going to happen. So let's make sure that we've got it in place to where that'll be okay. And we're also having the money work for you to where it's multiplying. So there's just several factors that go into that can actually help you. And so
Yeah.
I love that you do that.
One of the things that you mentioned too, and I think is really important, I think that there are also people who will save and then say, oh, I know how to save, but I always drain it out. Or they save and then they never touch it. And under both circumstances, there's some work that needs to be done,
There's
right?
scarcity mindset. Yeah.
when we're thinking about money that is being saved, when we're thinking about saving, it's not do not touch ever, right? There's some money that I like to call it an emergency fund that is specifically earmarked for an emergency. And you get to define what an emergency is, right? And I like to tell my clients, like, set those parameters now, right? You're not going to try to set it in the middle of chaos. You want to create an emergency fund and say, this is how I define an emergency, right? If I lose my source of income, if I have to my source of income, if there's an unexpected, unplanned expense that comes up, this is how I'm going to use my emergency fund. But then there's this other bucket, and I like to call it the saving to spend fund. And this is money that you are saving to spend on a specific experience or item. So I have, for example, a travel fund, and I use that travel fund not to buy the latest and greatest, electronic device or clothing or anything like that. It's specifically to use for my travel. I have a car maintenance fund or a vehicle maintenance fund or a car replacement fund, right? I'm like, my car fund fits all of those things. Right now, I have an older vehicle, but I know that maintenance fund also has to fund the next replacement vehicle as well. So that fund is specifically for that car replacement. When we're thinking about business money as well, right? It's like, okay, the tax bucket, we got the tax bucket. That's going to be specifically for taxes, right? We know that business owners, we have inconsistent income and nothing has gone wrong. That is totally normal. That is not a problem, but we want to make sure that we have some working capital available to us. So when that money fluctuates, it's not a problem. We planned for this, right? We have this bucket of money to use when there's some seasons or months that might be a little bit lower than others. So I think it's really important. So when we're thinking about savings does not mean do not touch ever. It's touch this money if there's an emergency. Touch this money if it's for your vacation. Touch this money, use this money for home maintenance, right? So many times we either begin to save and then we dip into it and then feel really guilty for dipping into it. And I'm like, well, did you say that you were only going to use it for XYZ reason, right? If you decided like this is only to be used for an emergency, did you use it for an emergency? I have some clients who will save their money in a travel fund and a vacation fund, and then they have so much drama about using the money for the vacation fund. And I'm like, okay, hold on. What was this money there for? Was it meant to be an emergency fund? Was it meant to never touch? Was it supposed to stay there for 10 years?
Right.
You earmarked it as a travel fund. And you have done something that your body and your brain cannot conceptualize. You haven't done this before, which is save money for this specific instance and now go and enjoy that, right? Go and enjoy the fruits of that consistency that you have. And so when we're thinking about savings, I think it's really important to understand what the heck are we saving for? What are we saving for? Is this to be spent 6 months from now, 12 months from now, 13 months from now, right? Or is this money to be spent only during emergency? And if we can begin to think about our savings accounts in that way, or working capital or business reserves, if we can begin thinking about the money that we do have, quote unquote, saved, it can really help us and give us freedom to use it in the times that is necessary and also not to use it when it wasn't intended.
Now, I do it similar but different, and people have heard me talk about this. And I don't use the word emergency. I don't have an emergency fund. I have a rainy day savings. However, I also don't have it for appliances and stuff like that. It is for rainy day savings for things that are for like income, that kind of thing. What I do for personal and I teach my clients, and my clients are like, oh my gosh, I love this, because now when I see something I want for my kid, or I know I got to get something for my kid, I just go to the savings account that's called My Kids.
Yep.
So, and I'm like, that's what I tell them. I said, I have people freak out. There's so many people who laugh when they're like, wait a minute, how many savings accounts do you have? I'm like, do you really want to know? And I didn't start off with that many. Okay.
Yeah.
Personal, I have a bunch. But I started off with a couple. Now, over the years, I have several. The main ones I have a vehicle savings. That is because I live in a state where we pay property taxes on our vehicles. Yes, I know there are a bunch of them out there. South Carolina is one of them. And I'm going to pay a good bit of money every single year if I want that sticker on the back of my the license plate to say that I'm good to go. And so I know about how much that's going to be. I know eventually tires are going to have to be replaced. I know I'm going to have to do the oil change. So I estimate those things, and I have a certain amount that goes in there every single month. And I add that amount to my money roadmap, listed as an expense, so that I know where money is going. And then I have one for my kids. I have one for it's house repairs. So like that's your refrigerator, your washer, your dryer,
Yeah,
the
your
things
home
that
maintenance.
like to go out all of a sudden, and you know what I mean, and you don't know about it, right? And then with my business, I have a tax savings account. I have an operating account. I have a yearly savings account, and that is for those yearly expenses that are going to be due that aren't going to be in your operating because you're not thinking about them now, that's due in October of this year. So I love the fact that you do that. And again, what I tell people is nickname them. So that way, when your brain goes, oh, I can tell, nope, that money is for my trip to Paris or whatever. Because I say specifically name it. That's my cruise trip. Nope, can't touch that money. That's for that.
Yeah.
This is for that. And I've even trained my kids. We have an out to eat fund. So we have an out to eat, quote unquote, savings account. If there's money in that account, then we can go out to eat or I can treat them something. If there's no money in that account, then we don't go. And they over time, now they don't ask me, Mommy, can we have it? Mom, how much money is in the out to eat account? And the reason why is so that I was able to say, okay, look, this is the plan. This is how much money. If we don't want to do this and we want to go to a nicer restaurant, then we save it. We keep it in there until the following month because this is what we're wanting to do, right? Because we have a plan where I'm going to be buying a house. So we're reducing some of those things so that I'm able to buy a house. And so I love the fact that you're saying like specific, understand it's not to never ever touch. That's not what we're talking about. I have a question. This will be the last one because I think it's so important. Why do so many high earners still feel behind financially?
Oh, I love this question. I feel like and people might not even consider themselves a high earner, right? So some people making multiple six figures are like, I'm not a high earner because it doesn't feel like it. It doesn't feel like they're able to spend on those lifestyle expenses. When we're thinking about building wealth, it's really simple. Building wealth is all about knowing what your income is, knowing exactly what your expenses are, and whatever's left over is what you use to save and to build wealth. It's that simple. Your income minus your expenses, and whatever's left over is what you use to save and what you use to build wealth. If you are in a situation that you take your income, you subtract all of your expenses, and you have nothing or very little left over, it's going to be really hard to save money and also to invest to build wealth. And so one of the things that I think is really important to get crystal clear on is to know what are your non-negotiables, right? So we all know we have those essential expenses, right? Keep a roof over our head, food on the table, keep the lights on, right? Those are the things that we absolutely need to live every day. But then make sure that you add those things that also improve your quality of life and that bring you joy and that are really intentional expenses. And this is going to vary for every person. So you might have some streaming services, you might have some personal care, you might have some subscriptions, right? You get to decide what those lifestyle expenses are. So many times we spend money out of trying to fix the disappointment or the stress that we have or try to pay for conveniences, which is not a problem. And we don't know the true cost of it, right? We don't know the actual, and I'm not talking about the price tag. I'm talking about the true cost of adding these additional expenses to your spending plan or your budget or your roadmap, as you call it, right? To really sort of understand where's the money, is the money going to places that I actually want it to go? And we didn't really touch on this, but when we're thinking about building wealth, it is more long-term thinking, right? This is about, okay, how long do I want to continue to run this business in this way? How long do I want to continue to work at this job? Retirement, society has told us that it is 65. What about if you could get there at 60? What about if you could fund your own retirement, right? When we're thinking about retirement, it's not an age, it's a dollar amount. It's not an age, it's just a number. And if you can fund your own retirement or fund your own financial independence, and financial independence is simply, as I mentioned, it's giving yourself option, but financial independence at its core simply means you have a nest egg, you have a portfolio, you have enough assets that it can passively, that means you no longer have to work for it, that it can passively sustain your life. And I think that when I realized that wait a minute, I don't have to depend on a 401k. I don't have to depend on a pension, which many people don't even have access to anymore. I can fund my own retirement, and it's not an age. All I need to do is to make sure that the money that I'm setting aside, and we're not talking about a savings account. Savings is great because we're going to be spending that money.
Right.
When we're talking about building wealth, it's how can I have this money make more money for me? You want every dollar that you have to be working harder than you are. And that money that is in that wealth bucket, that money that's in that retirement account is specifically there to create enough wealth so that one day working becomes optional, or one day you can have a healthy retirement.
Yeah, absolutely. Wally, this has been such a powerful conversation. I love all of this. For the listeners who want to connect with you and dive deeper, where can they find you? And can you share more about your free resource?
Yes, thank you so much. I really appreciate this conversation. I hope it's been helpful. You can find all my socials and things like that at financiallythriving.com. I'm most active on Instagram, so send me a DM if you're there. I'm at financially_thriving. And I do have a resource library. I have a couple of different things. So if you go to financially thriving.com/resource, you can choose one of the resources that might be most helpful to you.
Awesome. And all of this stuff will be in the show notes. And for my ladies that are listening, or for any of my listeners, if you're making money but still feel behind, if debt has you spinning, or if you're ready to finally feel aligned with your wealth, then it's time to book a wealth alignment call. We'll look at your numbers, your mindset, and your money identity, and we'll align them to the wealthy CEO you're meant to be. The link for this will also be in the show notes. And until next time, remember, confidence and cash are the ultimate power duo. And as I say, go check in with your money and always have a fantastic and wealthy day. Until next time.